Hi, I'm Michael Stittle.
And I'm Nick Nanos.
And welcome to Trendline, a podcast about polling. You can hear us every other week wherever you find podcasts and also on YouTube. Obviously, the big news this week, Nick, is the huge truckers' protest on Parliament Hill throughout Ottawa. I don't know if you've heard anything about this.
Truckers' protest? What truckers' protest? Am I on the right show? Yes, the truckers' protest. As you and our listeners and viewers might know, the office is one block from the House of Commons. And I'll tell you, last Friday and Saturday, I was in the office, and that's all I was hearing was all day long.
Wow.
Don't crunch numbers while listening to a horn honking. But you know what? The truckers were out in full force. I could just tell you what I saw. I didn't see anything disrespectful. I didn't see anything really confrontational. Very enthusiastic horn honking, absolutely. Flag waving, I saw that too. And not a lot of people in the protest wearing masks on purpose. So it's kind of like I'd be wearing my mask and they'd be like, hey, you, what are you doing? You're not one of us. And I'd be like, sorry, I'm just following what the public health authorities say. So yes, a disruption downtown. The other thing is that it's clear that it's not just transport truck drivers. Lots of people with pickup trucks and trucks just in general. So a popular front coalition that wanted to send a message to politicians in Ottawa.
Well, we'll talk about that in this episode, Nick. If this is signs of a bigger movement, I hear that they're getting more organized with statements of intent now. So I want to talk about that. As we're recording this, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is facing a threat to his leadership, and how much of that comes from this movement that we're seeing with the truckers' protests. We'll talk about that. Also, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney faces his own truckers' protest at the U.S. border, and the Freedom Convoy got some major support from our southern neighbors. Former U.S. President Donald Trump came out in support. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But first, how is Erin O'Toole doing right now? And how much of this do you think does it have to do with this movement we're seeing?
Well, there are a couple of things at play, Michael. When we look at the national ballot trend, what's interesting is that both of the main federal parties are below 30%, which is bad news for both of those parties. The New Democrats are at around 20 or to 21%. So that's actually a pretty good number for them. And numerically, the Conservatives are ahead of the Liberals, but statistically within the margin of error. But the thing is that when we start looking at the preferred prime minister trending and also perceptions of the leaders, especially O'Toole and Trudeau, that's really where the numbers start to plummet. Trudeau's actually at a low that we haven't seen since 2019, and views of both of those leaders are not very strong right now. So the truckers, if I can say, are an enabling or triggering event for folks within the Conservative tribe, specifically caucus members who are grumpy, right? Probably they've been grumpy. I think since some of them have been grumpy since Erin O'Toole was selected the leader of the Conservatives, because they thought they were getting a social conservative. And then he turned out to be a little more progressive, or at least more progressive than they thought he was. So the trucking rally has put a spotlight and has mobilized the grumpiness within the Conservative caucus, hence the vote this week on Erin O'Toole's future.
So before the trucker convoy even reached your fair city of Ottawa, we saw Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre come out in support of it. Andrew Scheer, the former leader, also came out in support of it. They're really kind of pushing for support, and Erin O'Toole was sort of I don't know if it's fair to say a latecomer to the cause. So how much does this bode for what does this mean for the future of the Conservative Party if they're sort of being pushed in this direction?
Well, the fact that this particular vote has occurred, right, is actually a problem for the Conservatives, because that's all for average people. And for people that might be open to voting for the Conservatives, they basically look at the news and they see, well, the Conservatives this week had a vote of had a vote of like the up-down finger on, or thumb, I should say. They didn't give O'Toole the finger. Maybe some of them did, but anyways, let's say it's a thumb on his leadership, and that just can't be. It just can't be good news whenever a significant portion of any caucus votes in favor of having a vote. The fact of the matter is, it didn't really matter what the outcome was. It's bad news for O'Toole and bad news for the Conservatives. And what's interesting is that the trucking protest has basically allowed some of the folks that are not as happy with Erin O'Toole as the leader of the Conservatives to draw him out. But you know what? O'Toole's trying to appeal to as many Canadians as possible, like every politician. If he had taken a page out of the book of other successful Conservative leaders, and I'll just mention two, Stephen Harper, Brian Mulroney, both who won more than one mandate, they had the same type of elements within their parties that were a little more socially conservative than perhaps they were. And they basically didn't try to ameliorate them. They basically said, hey, who would you prefer to be in government? Would you like the Liberals in government or the Conservatives in government? And maybe, Brian Mulroney was not a perfect option. And maybe for some, Stephen Harper might not have gone far enough on social conservative issues. But better to have, for those individuals, better to have the Conservatives in power than the Liberals. That should have been the key message for O'Toole to the truckers. Not, am I perfect? Do I support everything that you want? But who would you rather have at 24 Sussex? And that was really I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity for O'Toole, basically to say, yeah, there's some things that I support that you're doing because everyone is frustrated. They're wondering about when the mandates will end, when we'll get back to normal. I'm not comfortable with some of the other things that you've asked for or that you want, but who would you rather have as the leader of Canada? Would you rather have a Conservative leader or a Liberal leader? That would have probably been a better path for him if he had been more clear in articulating that.
I just want to touch on a sort of potential strategy for the federal Conservatives you've touched on before, Nick, that there's room in the center, essentially, that there's some soft Liberals, because as you said, with both parties are under 30% support right now, and this strategy that O'Toole had during the last election was sort of to more of a center right party. Maybe that's fair to say.
Yep.
Is that strategy still an option considering this caucus revolt and what's happened to O'Toole?
Well, it's still an option, but the thing is the Conservatives, the damage that's being done is completely self-inflicted. Like, the Conservatives have to be united. If they're not united, they can't win the election, period, full stop. Like, parties don't win when they can't even agree on some fundamentals. And you know what? The Conservative Party has to agree on what his position is on the pandemic. But the thing is that right now they're looking over their right shoulder, and what do they see? Maxime Bernier, former Conservative cabinet minister from Quebec, now leader of the PPC. And our numbers, the PPC in the last election got around 5%. Now they're starting to trend up a little bit. They're at like 6-7% now. It'll be interesting to see whether there's any other kind of bump on that front. And but here's the other kind of complication. The other complication is that in our seat projections, the Conservatives are actually closing the gap right now between them and the Liberals, because the NDP are moving up, right? That the NDP are splitting the progressive vote. So if the Liberals are below 30%, that's good news for the way the distribution of votes and potential seats works. So here's the ironic twist. The Conservatives are looking at torching or getting rid of Erin O'Toole. And right now, the seat projections haven't looked better than they have in quite a long time, because the Liberal numbers are down and the NDP numbers are better than they were in the last federal election.
Wow, that's amazing. Nick, I want to move on to Alberta, where we have another trucker convoy, and this one at the US-Canada border. So Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has come out strong against it. He's called it flat out unlawful. Why is that a different situation? Why can he come out against it in such forceful terms as opposed to the federal Conservatives and what they're dealing with in Ottawa?
2 letters, PD. Do you know what that stands for? Any guesses? No? political defibrillator. He's got like this defibrillator because when you look at the trend line on his polling numbers,
Yeah.
he's trailing the New Democrats. He's the sitting premier of Alberta. Alberta is a pretty conservative place, conservative-minded place with a very strong conservative tradition. He presided over the unification of the different conservative parties to win the last election, and now he's trailing the person that he defeated. And Rachel Notley and the New Democrats are now in the driver's seat. So this is like, Michael, a political defibrillator. He's trying to resuscitate support, and he's trying to tap into the truckers' protest. The good thing for him is his protest is not against him or his government or at the legislature in Edmonton. His protest is down deep in the heart of Alberta, southern Alberta on the US border, where truckers are spontaneously, and well, why don't we just say that it's spontaneously or organized in an organized way, trying to disrupt things in order to have their own trucking protests. So he's basically trying to re-engage, change the channel for a lot of Albertans who have been disappointed with his government over the last year, and to try to move those united conservative numbers, because right now they're not really looking pretty good from a polling perspective.
No, and I have to ask, I mean, if we're seeing a future, position opening up for the federal Conservatives, do you think Kenney, given the low numbers he's got in Alberta, do you think he would ever consider it, let's say?
Is this some kind of Star Trek alternative universe that you're talking about? Sorry. No.
This is like the mirror universe.
If he can't hold on to support in Alberta, what makes anybody think that Conservatives anyplace else would vote for him? I think, what the interesting trajectory about Jason Kenney is, first of all, he was an extremely successful cabinet minister and loyal cabinet minister to Stephen Harper. Jason Kenney was, if not the architect, one of the key conservatives behind the ability of the Harper government to connect with new Canadians, like in the Mississaugas and stuff like that, and in Vancouver and other parts of the country. And he united the conservative movement in Alberta. You look at those things and you go, wow, this guy's got it all. He speaks French, he's from Alberta, successful cabinet minister, didn't make any mistakes, politically astute, united the Conservatives in Alberta. Like, that ticks a whole bunch of boxes. You'd think he'd be on a trajectory potentially, if he so chose, to be the prime minister or the leader of the Conservative Party, and then governing. It's kind of like, it's like quagmire. It's like Vietnam. Right? He's fighting a land war in Vietnam, and he's just getting bogged down with a lot of these details. And all those things that led up to him being premier suggested a very positive and strong trajectory for him to be a key player, leader, part of the conservative positive brand across the country. And it's just unraveled under his premiership as he's kind of led Alberta. So it's the alternative universe. It's kind of like he's in the alternative universe with the alternative Spock, and like maybe Jason Kenney's got like a mustache,
a goatee.
Like that. I don't know. Anyways, but that's not happening.
Wow. Well, Nick, after the break, we're going to talk about former U.S. President Donald Trump and his support for Canadian truckers. Nick, so the Freedom Convoy has gotten a major supporter from our southern neighbors. That is former U.S. President Donald Trump. They've also gotten a shout out from Elon Musk. What is this interest that Trump has in Canadian truckers?
Well, the thing is, you talk about the Freedom kind of Convoy. Doesn't that sound American? It sounds very American. So, and when was the last time Donald Trump said anything about Canada? When's the last time he said anything nice about Canada?
NAFTA, I think, renegotiating NAFTA.
Pause. Yeah, your volume's not turned off, listeners. So think of it this way. For Donald Trump, what he sees is a movement that's very similar to movements and sentiment that he stokes and encourages in the United States. So he probably finds this very validating. Like Elon Musk, I don't understand Elon Musk because, let's face it, he's the grooviest CEO in the world, and Maybe it's because he's got that self-driving truck business that he's hoping that the truckers mess things up. I don't know. But you know, the thing is that this this protest, this freedom kind of convoy in Canada that is led by truckers, definitely is not just on the agenda in Canada, it's on the agenda in the United States, because in the United States, they're talking and they're having the same debate related to personal freedoms and rights and a path forward out of the pandemic. So why don't we say that populist, anti-establishment contagion, I won't even call it a virus, it's a contagion, a fever, is now in Canada. So congratulations, Canada. This is our first real big protest, anti-establishment movement that we've seen in a long time that is very similar to things that we've seen in other countries like France, the United Kingdom, the United States, even in parts of Germany.
It does feel like part of a much more global phenomenon that continues. I think with the truckers, we can sort of trace back this movement all the way back to the Alberta Wexit movement. But as you said, Nick, the language of freedom, we even saw at least one Confederate flag during this protest for one of the protesters in Ottawa. How much of what is the possibility that this becomes more organized? Do you think it will be sort of subsumed by the People's Party, or will it become its own party? Or where is this going?
Oh, let's face it, Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party, is looking at this protest convoy like a big political pork chop. Like he's looking at this and thinking, here's an opportunity for him to continue. You know, the last election was a breakthrough for the PPC. Let's just say that 5% is good. They got more votes than the Green Party of Canada, right? That's been around for a while and had members in the House of Commons. So what Maxime Bernier is probably hoping is that this further galvanizes anti-establishment kind of views against Ottawa, and also that he becomes kind of the convening power around these individuals. And you know, so I think, and this is kind of very much like the last federal election. It started off with some people that were not hot on the vaccination policy of Justin Trudeau to come out and protest, and then others joined. Others that thought that the Liberals were a tired government, others that thought Ottawa was out of touch, others that thought that there needed to be change. And we've seen the exact same thing here. It might have started off with the vaccination of truckers. And Michael, we must say, for disclosure purposes, that between 80, depending on how it's counted, the estimates are that between 80 and 90% of truckers are vaccinated. So it's not like they're not getting vaccinated. Truckers are just as vaccinated or more vaccinated than other parts of our country. But what's happened is, for those that are vaccine hesitant, it starts off with them, and then what happens is others who are upset with the government on a number of other issues join. And that's why we see some of these other elements that are part of it. And you know, I think that's basically the risk, is the characterization that some of the more fringe elements of this truckers protest are more mainstream. And it's hard really to know what it really is. But the fact of the matter is, the truckers protest is now a platform to send a message to Ottawa that Ottawa has failed, that the federal party leaders, especially Trudeau and O'Toole, are not doing enough, that people are frustrated with the government, that they're frustrated with the pandemic, and they want to get their lives back. And you know what? Even for Canadians that are not supportive of the trucking protest, that frustration exists for them. They want to know, are they going to be able to send their kids to school? They want to know when they're going to be going back to work. And now we're coming on 2 years, Michael, of a pandemic. So should we be surprised that every Canadian wants to spank every politician that they bump into, and not in a positive sense?
Not in a positive sense.
Yes.
Nick, thank you as always. Before we go, I just want to give a shout out to our esteemed leader, Trevor Correll, who got this podcast up off the ground and running. This is his last episode. He's moving on. He's trucking on, I guess I'll say. So Trevor, thank you very much from all of us in the Trendline team. And Nick, as always, thank you. And thank you to our listeners. You can find us again in 2 weeks.
Take it easy.